deliver to the workshop. With kind permission from the esteemed panelists here, if I could request all of you to very briefly introduce yourself with your name, with the institution that you are working with, and with a little bit of work that you are doing. We have to keep it very brief as possible, and then we can move on to the other agendas for the day. So can we start from this side?
I think there's a mic there. Shares.
Yeah.
Hello, good morning all. Yeah, my name is Novatus Mushi from National Environment Management Council in Tanzania. I'm working at the Directorate of Environmental Research and Management. So in fact, I was the coordinator for this event. Yeah, I'm happy to see you here. Please welcome.
Good morning. My name is Dimbungi Chora Boneke. I'm working with them, Tanzania, Manager for Compliance, Promotion, Monitoring, and Directorate of Compliance and Enforcement.
Good morning. My name is Nico Masule from the Ministry of Environment, Forestry and Tourism in Namibia, working under the Department of Environmental Affairs, Forestry, Subdivision of Waste Management, Pollution Control. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rose Ogaya. I work with the Ministry of Health, dealing with climate change and health and waste management.
Good morning. My name is Unit Eswan from National Environment Management Council in Tanzania, working with under Department of Directorate of Environmental Management and Research. Thank you.
No, it's not working. I think if you can just put it from the bottom, there's a switch there.
Good morning. My name is Rita Nandi from National Environment Management Council and the Directorate of Environment Research Development in Tanzania.
My name is Barrios Moyombera. I'm working with the National Environmental Management Council of Tanzania as the Director of Environmental Research and Coordination. Specifically, I'm a marine environmentalist. So there I'm working as a researcher. Thank you.
Good morning, colleagues. My name is Ndumisamo Kakula. I work for the Eswatini Environment Authority, wherein I'm an environmental inspector responsible for waste management, working under the Directorate of Environmental Assessment and Compliance. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Trifonia Angelos Kisiga. I am a City Director of Mbeya City Council. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
My name is Baraniko Kasongo. I am from the Regional Commissioner's Office, Delta Region. I'm working under the Directorate of Economy and Production. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Admiral Chukuro, the City Director for Arusha.
Good morning. My name is Brian Isekavea from the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development in Zambia.
Good morning. My name is Howard Jada from President Office, Regional Administration, Europe Government. We are looking for more local government authority, better experiments, and environment.
Good morning. I'm Savame Bal, environmental officer from the Municipal Council, working in Management Executive Unit.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Helen Nachinawa. I'm a journalist working for One Age Communications Limited in Dar es Salaam. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Raja Ali Mbwaga, working with the Salaam City Council, head of Waste Management Sanitation.
Morning. My name is Ezra Guya. I'm working with the Ubungo Municipal Council, one of the local government authority in the city of Dar es Salaam. So in fact, if you move around the city, then it means we are responsible for that. If you find it otherwise, there are some other people responsible.
Well
Morning. My name is Nice Mauna. I'm working with the Government Municipal Council. I'm the head of Waste Management Research.
Morning. My name is Enoch Tombo. I'm coming from the Salaam City Council, Department of Environment and Southwest Management. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Geoffrey Zenda from the Salaam City Council, working with Department of Health, Unit of Solid Waste Management. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Richard Mugambwa. I work with the National Environment Management Authority of Uganda. I've worked in various capacities as a project manager for the Uganda Municipal Solid Waste Composting Project. I work as a senior environmental inspector there, and I also manage. I am the national focal point of the social project. Thank you.
Morning. My name is Jacob Dalla from Zanzibar Urban Municipal Council as an environmental officer and the solid waste management.
Good morning. My name is Makame Hanji Famis from Transfer Environmental Management Authority, SEMA. I'm working under the Division of Environmental Operation.
Good morning. My name is Said Ishaq Said from the Ministry of Blue Economic Fisheries and the Department of Marine Conservation, Manager of Batu Marine Conservation Area. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We'll now move with the next agenda. May I now invite the Director General of
very hot Delhi to your beautiful city with much better weather. We're really delighted to be here, my colleagues and I, and we see this as an opportunity to learn. We want to hear from you, and which is why, if you see the program, it has been designed so that each representative will get time to talk about what's happening. We want to understand, and then we want to design an agenda which has use to you and to us. How do we move ahead? So that based on the learning, we have an idea what to do. So this is really what our plan and our hope is for the next 2 days. I will give you a brief presentation on CSC's work on solid waste management. What have we learned over this last some years, and what is it that we would like to share? So this is really what my presentation is. Can you see it? You can. Otherwise, I would invite you both to come down. Maybe. So do I have to hold this up and then speak? Is that the way? Okay, no problem. I just want to know. So we did this book, and we provocatively called it Not in My Backyard, and I will explain to you why we called a book on solid waste management Not in My Backyard. But this was a research that we did some years ago to set the agenda on what we call waste-wise cities. What makes a city wise in terms of its waste management? Now, what is very clear, and I think I'm speaking to people whose business this is, so I don't need to tell you about it, but I just want to flag that we know that solid waste is a real problem. Garbage is increasing in our cities. It is adding to our health burden. It pollutes our water bodies. It becomes a place for mosquitoes and other diseases to breed. But more than that, for many of you who are city managers, it is adding to the economic burden of city municipalities as you struggle to collect and then to transport. And of course, today's biggest concern is, and particularly from my colleagues from the coastal areas, it is adding marine litter and contamination of our oceans. So we need strategies to handle this growing mountains of waste in our cities. Now, one thing that we need to be very clear about is that it will get worse. There is no doubt in my mind that Africa will increase its economic growth. There is no doubt in my mind that each one of your cities will get richer with time. And we have to remember that waste that a society produces is directly proportional to the wealth it has. Poorer societies have less waste. Richer societies, much more waste. If you look at this chart, you will see that on a per capita basis, how the waste increases. And this is going to happen as you get richer, and you must. The other, and for all of you as waste managers, it's not the quantity of waste that will change, that will increase, but the composition, the characteristic of waste will change. And this will make it more difficult to manage. If you look at this chart over here, this is South Asia, and I will come to Africa. Look at South Asia. I just want to give you this as a comparison between South Asia and the OECD countries. In most of South Asia, countries like mine, India, is 50% biodegradable waste. Okay? The rest of it is plastic, paper, metals, and others. But if you look at the OECD countries, less and less waste proportion is biodegradable. More and more of it is non-biodegradable. It's the same thing when we compare two cities of India. So we love doing these cities plans. You know, most governments do city plans based on city rankings, based on other things. For us at CSC, we look at excreta, we look at pollution, we look at waste. Take these two cities. One city is in Bihar, poor, Muzaffarnagar, Muzaffarpur. So if you look at this city, almost 90% of the waste that this city produces is biodegradable organic waste. Move to another city of India, relatively richer, Vijayawada, and you will see that the organic waste component goes down to 43%. So on an average, India is about 50%, but that's because there are urbanized areas, there are richer areas. So our biodegradable waste on an average is 50, but if you compare poor cities with rich cities, you will see the composition of waste very clearly. If you look at Africa and South African countries of Africa, broadly the data we have been able to see is that about 43% of your waste is biodegradable, food and green waste. In our part of the world, it's a little higher. It's because of the nature of society. But roughly 50% is what you can assume is the waste that comes out is biodegradable waste. And the rest of it is non-biodegradable. Important to understand the composition, as all of you know, because the composition of waste determines the management of waste. If it's biodegradable, it is compostable. It is manageable in terms of returning it back to the soil. If it's not biodegradable, if it's plastic, it's paper, it's metals, then you have to plan for it differently. Some fraction of it could be recyclable, some of it could not. And that's what we need to understand, the characteristic of waste before we understand. And then transport the waste to landfill sites. Now, the problem with this is the cost of collection is high. In our part of the world, people are poor and often cannot pay the cost of collection and transportation. But more than that, the landfill sites are now moving further and further from the cities. The old landfill sites, which were inside the city, is where the city are often overfull, and you cannot find a new landfill site in the city because the rich in the city do not want any landfill next to them. That is the NIMBY, not in my backyard. And we move to further and further away because land cost is cheaper there. But this adds to transportation costs, making it even more unsustainable. So we need to know that this strategy of collection and transportation and dumping is something that we will have to seriously reinvent. And we can, because we have advantages that the rest of the world does not. So the agenda, in a nutshell, is we are too poor to waste. We have to take the approach that waste is a resource. We will not waste waste. We will recycle and reuse. We are too poor to use land to dump waste. And therefore, for us, the strategy underpinning our solid waste management work has to be a zero landfill. And I will explain. It doesn't mean 0, but it means absolutely the last fraction that cannot go anywhere else has to go to a landfill. So we must build, and for this, the most important part of our strategy, because we come from countries where employment is necessary, where we need to secure the livelihoods of poor people. We have to build sustainable and safe livelihoods from waste processing, recycling. Today, there is a buzzword in the whole world. They're talking about circular economy. We need to tell the whole world, we practice circular economy. We are a nation, a continent of recyclers. We need to celebrate that and work it into our policy. And if you look, we compare data from South Asia to Sub-Saharan Africa, and 70% the data we have, on an average, 70% is open dumping. 12% is landfill. Very little data in terms of the quality of the landfill, but there is a landfill. In our part of the world, we're not very different. 75% of it is open dumping. So we need to know that this strategy we have where we are dumping waste, either from a household because municipalities cannot collect it, or municipalities spending the money, collecting the waste, and then taking it to a dump site. That strategy will not work for us. And that's really got to be the bottom line as we move ahead. So I will have a 5-point, I think, agenda. I think it's 5 point, 4 point. Let me take you through. First, and this is the bottom line, ladies and gentlemen, and this is the most, what I call the Achilles heel of waste management, is segregation at source. Because if we are planning a strategy of waste as a resource, then you must segregate and collect segregated waste. This whole myth we have been sold that we can segregate at a dump yard. We can first mix the wet waste and the dry waste, and then somebody will segregate it. Does not work. The poor in our countries spend a lot of labor going to a dump yard and picking up and sorting out the waste. But this is not the strategy that we need for the future. So we have to do segregated waste transport. It has to be processed in a way that cities collect the waste in terms of dry waste, wet waste, and they need to collect it, segregate it, transport it, segregate it. So segregate, segregate, segregate is actually the only true waste manager's mantra. It is difficult. Not take light of this. You are all city managers, you are environmental officers. I don't want to come here and tell you, why don't you segregate? It is very difficult to get households to segregate, to get municipalities to transport segregated waste. It is also very difficult in our part of the world to penalize households for not segregating. But we will have to find innovative approaches. Two approaches I just want to underline, there are many approaches, but two of my most interesting or ones that I find very interesting is a city in south of India called Alapi. It's in Kerala. Now there they have a very interesting approach. The municipality doesn't collect waste at all. No waste is collected at all. And the reason is very simple. The reason is the municipality has not been able to find a waste dump. Because wherever they go to build a waste dump, somebody protests. And they say, no, we can not in my backyard. And Kerala is one of India's most literate, most politically aware states. So the poor in Kerala are also very, they know what they want. So the city has not been able to find a waste dump. So they basically tell people, please manage waste on your own. Now, managing waste on their own, people have learned to segregate. They compost and they put their recyclables and they call up a recycler and then they send the recyclable waste to the recycler. The other cities in India are finding that's too radical. We cannot do that. So other cities are doing something which is even more interesting. They only collect biodegradable waste on a daily basis. They collect non-biodegradable waste on a predefined basis. So they force you to separate out on a daily basis your own waste because they will not collect mixed waste. And there are many other innovations that we are learning both from African cities as well as from South Asia. But the fact is, there is a ranking of cities that the Indian government does every year, and all cities want to be highest rank. Now, different marks are given for what defines cleanliness. So in 2017, when the ranking began, and CSE intervened to tell the government that this would not work. When the ranking began, the highest marks were given for collection and transfer. So visible cleaning was what the Indian government said was what was a clean city. If you could do transportation of your waste, if there was no waste littering your streets, you were a first-ranked city in terms of cleanliness. Today, the complete parameters have been changed by the government. The ratings, the weightages, the marks that are given for what defines cleanliness has been changed. Cities are today ranked on how much they segregate, how much they process, how much they recycle, and how little waste goes to the landfill site. So the ranking has actually now I'm not saying it has happened. Please, I'm too realistic to tell you that you can use a ranking and everything will change, especially in a complicated, vast country like India, or even in Tanzania, even in Zambia, anywhere. But rankings are indicators, and I hope you will agree with me, sir, that rankings are indicators of state policy. They tell us what does the state measure is good. And the fact that today the Indian state says to cities, I rank you good if you have done segregation. It tells me that the policy has changed. Now practice must change, but that is the beginning of the change we bring. The other thing that I wanted to point out is I hear a lot from your managers, and I hear this from Indian cities, that waste to energy plants is an answer. That somebody will come, take your waste, build an incineration plant, and tomorrow you will have no problem. Please, please, when somebody comes and tells you this, please take our experience that the waste to energy plant can only be successful based on the quality of waste that goes to the plant. If you look at the Indian experience, we began our waste to energy plants in 1987. And that plant has become what we call a white elephant, a graveyard today, because it never worked because the quality of waste was not big enough. Since then, we have built many waste to energy plants, and many of them are lying idle without producing energy or enough energy to make them sustainable. And the reason is that the waste that goes to these plants is unsegregated, it is mixed waste, and therefore the calorific value of the waste that goes to the plant is not good enough to generate the electricity that we want from it. And as a result of it, the plant becomes unsustainable. It keeps asking the state for more and more money to fund it, to keep the operations going, and the state keeps paying the money just to burn garbage, not to generate electricity anymore. The global experience of waste to energy plants is very clear. They work only if you have high quality fuel that comes to the plants, which means segregated fuel. And it also works when the standards, emission standards for the waste to energy plant are very stringent. You need monitoring systems for dioxins and furans. You need to have stringent monitoring systems, and that increases the cost. The question I have to all of you is that if a waste to energy plant requires high quality segregated fuel, then why would our countries burn it? If you have processed the waste, we will recycle it, we will reuse it, we will make something out of it. Why will we burn it? And that is a question that you must ask as these plants get built. My second agenda is that you must recognize the informal sector in waste management. We have that the only reason our cities are not drowned in our waste is because there are the poor who collect it and then process it. I have seen this in my brief visit to Tanzania. I have seen people collecting plastic bottles. I have seen them collecting tins. I have seen them doing this. And they do it because they are poor. But we do not recognize this contribution. We do not even measure this contribution in our waste plans. We do not promote it. We do not reward it in our municipal bylaws. So we need policy to deliberately work with the informal sector so that you can actually make waste into a livelihood for our people. My third agenda I want to discuss a little bit is plastic. This we know is really bad for our environment. We know that plastic use has gone up in the world, and the Western world had thought that the plastic waste had gone away. If you think about it, when in the 80s and the 80s, 70s and 80s, when the Stockholm Conference was held and others in the world, the Western world was talking about their plastic problem. But then they thought they had recycled it, they had buried it, they had shipped it to some other place like Africa, to India, to Malaysia, somewhere where it could be recycled, to China. It's when China put a ban on the recycling for the import of plastic into China that the whole world stood up and said, what? There's so much plastic? And we have found today that it is the top environmental problem and that it is contaminating our oceans and filling up and destroying our marine life. This is the last frontier. And in India and Africa, we know that plastic waste is everywhere. It has literally become, I keep saying it, it is the sign of anthropogenic activity. You know that there is a human being who lives in this part of the world because there is some plastic waste. And our per capita use is going, and as we get richer, it will get more. Many countries, including Tanzania, and I know Rwanda, and I know many other countries, and I'd like to learn more, have put plastic on top of the political agenda. Okay? But is this enough? Are we doing enough? Should we do more to deal with plastic? We need to understand. Firstly, we need to understand what I call the material balance of plastic. So across the world, the narrative was changed by the plastic industry saying, oh, we are recycling it. We can throw it, it will be recycled. But the global material balance suggests that only 80% of the total plastic waste produced actually, becomes waste at some point. So 80% of the plastic produced in the world becomes waste. Only 9% is recycled, only 10% is recycled more than once, and only 12% has been incinerated. So we need to decode and deconstruct what we mean by recycling. We also need to understand the politics of recycling. So industry argues that plastic is not a problem. We will recycle. But data from India, and I have not seen equivalent data from Africa, but my one visit, one landfill site in she told me that you have the same problem. That large amount of plastic is still in the landfill. And so if it was being recycled so successfully, why is it filling up our landfills? Why is it filling up our water bodies? And this is why we need to understand what recycling means. What recycling means, the bottom line of it is, it will be recycled if it has value, if it can be collected and it can be processed. It will be recycled based on the cost of this recycling. If it is done by the rich, they will never be able to recycle plastic. It is too unaffordable. It is recycled in our part of the world because the cost of recycling is expensive, but we do it in poor, unhealthy conditions. So we can recycle our plastic. And that's something we need to understand, and we need to work to improve it. So if you deconstruct recycling, you will find that there is a primary recycling, which means that if you take this plastic bottle, you will make it into another bottle. You can't do that. Very rarely can you do that at the cost is very high. The secondary recycling is what is the maximum done to plastic. What will happen to this bottle? It will get collected. It will be taken to a factory where it will be shredded. After shredding, it will be boiled. After boiling and melting, it will be made pellets out of. And after the pellets are made, it will be made into a product which is less profitable than the first, which is made out of primary material. Tertiary recycling is very rarely done. What is done is the last, quaternary recycling, which is we take the plastic which cannot be recycled and we send it to an incineration plant. In India, they're sending it to cement plants or they're sending it at most for road making. So this is really what recycling means of plastic, and we need to understand that as we go ahead. And in that, we need definite strategy for what we call single-use and multi-layered plastic. Multi-layered plastic, which is this. Okay, and this is the worst because this is too small to collect. This is a real problem because it cannot be recycled. And we have found even when you have multi-layered plastic strategies through extended producer responsibility, EPR, they are not working because it is not profitable to collect, you cannot recycle, and you have to send it for incineration. Now just think, who is going to be able to collect this? How is it going to be collected? All the pouches that we sell are stuffed in, all the chips packets, all the food packaging in multi-layered plastic. That is really a problem. So the agenda 3 that I want to put down is a clear strategy for plastic management. In this, number 1, the banning of carry bags. And I think the Tanzania legislation that I have read is a really simple, brilliant piece of legislation because it bans all forms of carry bags. The Indian legislation is based on microns. How thick is it? And we are finding it impossible to regulate. So your legislation is clear, simple, and that is clearly the way we need to move. 2, we need a ban on single-use plastic, which are non-recyclable. We need a ban or a phasing out of multi-layered plastic. And thirdly, we need to promote the recycling industry in the informal sector. But all this is only possible, ladies and gentlemen, if you do the first, which is segregation at source, so that resource recovery is possible. My 4th agenda would be, we need to celebrate NIMBY, not in my backyard. In my country, we have found that waste management has changed when the poor get a voice to say not in my backyard. When the middle class in my city says not in my backyard, the incinerator is not built in my colony. The landfill is not set up in my colony, but it is always set up where the poor of my city live. Now it is when the poor of my city are saying not in my backyard, waste management strategies are changing. And please remember this, each country in Africa is responsible today for the world's most important global legislation, the Basel Convention. I was in Stockholm, I was in Rio in 1992 when the Basel Convention was being discussed. And it was very clear, the continent of Africa, which raised its voice and said, not in my backyard will you send your waste. And the whole world had to listen. So we need to celebrate not in my backyard and design a strategy so that livelihoods of the poor is managed. So I'm coming to the end. I just want to now flag what then would be the best principles of waste management, solid waste management. 1, that waste is recovered and livelihoods are secured. When we are looking at cities with a good waste management strategy, the following 3 big lessons come out. Number 1, they have integrated waste management with, in your world, what are called CBOs. In our world, what are called SHGs, self-help groups. They have built a sustainable livelihood model so that their people benefit from waste management. Two, they have deliberately planned for processing of segregated waste, wet waste, and once they have collected segregated wet waste, they have done composting either on a decentralized or a centralized basis, or they have done biomethanation. And for the dry waste, which is a separate stream, they have done a ban on carry bags, minimized the plastic, and then they have done recycling with the formal, informal recyclers, use the collected in road construction and cement plants. If you look at this is actually not CSC's chart. And I'm very proud to show this because this is how the government of India's official policy today is promoting what they're calling solid waste management hierarchy. See this? They first talk about wet waste, dry waste, and C&D waste. Construction and demolition waste. Then they talk about what are the most preferred methods, least preferred method. Most preferred for wet waste is reuse as animal food, processing, composting, biomethanation, and least preferred is landfill. When we come to dry waste, reuse of bottles, carry bags, containers, recycling, non-recycling proportion for energy recovery, and least preferred is landfill. If you come to C&D waste, this is construction and demolition waste, reuse of materials, recycling, processing, least preferred is landfill. And the bottom line says only inert fractions and processed rejects to be sent to sanitary landfills. And these are the guidelines of the Swachh Bharat Mission Urban 2.0. Swachh Bharat Mission is India's flagship program for waste management, for solid waste management in our cities. This is another part of their own guidelines. They talk about how you would do biodegradable waste, what would you do to non-biodegradable waste. So the waste strategy has to change keeping this in mind. Now, CSC, as I said, we launched our first book in 2016, which brought this learning both to India and to other cities of India. This was launched, in fact, by our now Vice President of the country. We have last year done a report with so we have something, I don't know if in Tanzania you have an equivalent, but we have something called the planning agency in India, which reports to the Prime Minister. It's called our Niti Aayog. It was earlier called the Planning Commission, now it's called the Niti Aayog. And last year we worked with the Niti Aayog, with this planning authority. They came to us and said, we really want you to document what are cities doing? How are they changing? Because we can all talk about what is bad, but what is good? That's what we need to learn from. You can't learn from the bad. You can only learn from the good. And so we did this report, which was released by the chairperson of the vice chairperson of the Niti Aayog, where the objective was to learn from cities the best practices, what is working, what more can be done. Now, based on all this learning that we have in India, and we have a report here, which is a scoping report for Africa, we want to set up, we want and we hope you will be part of it, this global forum of cities for circular economy, which is essentially very simple. It is about building knowledge of what works. It is about building capacity. It is about recognizing this good work so that models are created and more can be done. Everybody's good work must become the lesson for the next. And the challenges must become ways in which we can even do better. And so the way we would do this is to do meetings, doing study tours, doing a help desk so that we can resolve issues, documenting good practices, coming together to understand those, and then of course a national, international conclave where we can learn and celebrate this as we move ahead. So I just want to end with saying that as waste man, as city man, we are very important for our city. And I loved what the gentleman had said, that if we walk around and we find litter, don't blame him. But if we find good stuff, we will say that this was your work. And I must say, I had only one afternoon in that when I landed. I was really impressed. So I did not, my eyes are a sanitary inspector. I only see dirt around. So I did not see as much as I'd expected. So good, thank you. But the mantra for all of you, and I hope you will agree with me when I say this, that our mantra is that every backyard has to become a front yard. Because if it's not in my backyard, then in whose backyard will the waste go? It cannot go to somebody else's backyard who is the poor. Actually, the backyard has to become the front yard. When we manage our waste so that we are proud enough to put it in our front yard, we turn it into a resource. That is what waste management strategy is about. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Madam, for setting the tone of this whole event right at the beginning. May I now request Dr. Sunita Narayan, Dr. Menon, and Dr. Edwin, please to come back and occupy your seats on the stage. I would now request Dr. Menon Jambu, who is the Director of Environmental Research in the National Environment Management Council, who is here to represent the Office of the Director General NEMC Tanzania, to please come and deliver his keynote address for us.
So, yes, everybody there. So I would like to say good morning. Yeah, so on behalf of the Director General of Government Appointment, who could not be here with us for some other government businesses, so I would like to take the opportunity to share his briefing to the entire audience. He's very much excited to have the idea that we've come in many miles during this important session. He's very much appreciating this kind of commitment to address the challenge that we are facing. So he was supposed to be here and he had prepared a remark that he wanted to share with you regarding the solid waste management. So for me, I'll just try to read the way it is. So to start with, like Dr. Edwin Helen, on behalf of the Minister, President of Regional Administration and Local Government. So Dr. Sunita Narayan, we have been interacting for almost 3-4 days now. So we were in Manda, covered yesterday, come back to attend this session, and I'm sure you'll be here maybe the end of this week. So we feel happy. Yes. So the city directors from cities around Tanzania, I'm sure there are directors from there, Dodoma, Dar es Salaam, Arusha, and Panda, very much welcome. And there are members from CSE that we've been interacting for many years, like 5 years now, and I'm meeting some new colleagues here, so very much welcome. But I'm aware also of representatives from countries like Ethiopia, Kenya, Mozambique, Namibia, Zambia, Uganda, and Eswatini, and also my fellow colleagues. But without forgetting representatives from ministries and the other government institutions. But not to forget, there are colleagues, media personnel. I heard there's personnel, but I'm sure there are other colleagues from other media agencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. So Dr. Edwin had here with us to represent the minister that's in charge of solid waste management. We are very much pleased that we despite the busy schedule that we decided to come and share some ideas or highlight this important session. We very much appreciate for that. But I need to extend my sincere appreciation to the team from CSC, through the directorship of Dr. here, who very much welcome. I'm sure that with all this problem, you are still not tired to ensure that the exercise is completed as planned. So what I can say is that we are very pleased for CSC to organize this important session, in particular for this city of Dar es Salaam. We know that this big discussion going on all around the world about the circular economy and how that is the whole waste or the waste that we are generating. Recently, there was a discussion at the meeting of these three conventions, Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm. And the issue of solid waste emerged clearly that if the global heading to the right direction, with all this waste that is being generated but not properly managed. So for us, it's an important opportunity for us to have this kind of discussion. And what we can see here today, we are here partly because of the mutual and the friendly collaboration between CSC and NEM that has worked almost 5 years in different programs, EIA, environmental compliance, even development of regulations, and some like guidelines to improve mechanism or institutional framework in addressing the challenges that we are facing today. So we have participated in different programs as I said. Some of our colleagues at NEM, even other government agencies, have benefited from capacity building programs. Some have even been able to travel to India, New Delhi, and some other cities to learn from our colleagues on what they are doing. But also we have received developing our programs in how we can address the environmental problem that we are facing today. So coming to the problem of solid waste in general, we know it's a problem for almost every country in the world. It could be developing countries, it could be developing countries, it could be even in our home, it could be in our cities, it could be in our communities, it's almost everywhere. But how does it emerge? We know as the economy grows, then definitely we need to consume more and we need to generate more waste. That's the fundamental parameter on how we are generating more waste, because we need to get more resources to survive or to improve our livelihood. So the manner in which urban solid waste is managed in urban centers definitely reflects the governance. It could be good governance or poor governance. Doctor mentioned here that when she was traveling coming to Tanzania, she had a different perspective. But what she saw, to some extent, is different from what she expected. So we are very much pleased with the effort that these city directors are doing to address the problem of solid waste. So let's just acknowledge and give ourselves thank you that we are doing something like this. But if we cannot properly manage the waste, we are more likely to suffer from many problems. It's not just health. So the problem for solid waste management is to be prioritized in our efforts. Some have even argued that scientific evidence have proved that there is a direct correlation between poor solid waste management and the impact of climate change. We know solid waste generates methane and even other gases that are affecting the global warming. So there's that correlation. So we need to understand that. There are reports, for instance, according to UN Habitat World Cities report of 2020, we know that urban areas are home of about 55% of the world population. And the figure is projected to grow to about 68 by 2050. You can imagine everybody wants to come in urban cities. So there's implication on that. Tanzania being one of the countries in the developing world is also impacted with challenges of rapid urbanization. Come to Dar es Salaam, go to Mwanza, go to Mbeya, go to Arusha, go to Dodoma. We have the same kind of scenario in terms of growing population and the impact on the waste that is being generated. Now, the estimate that were projected for 2020 that the population was supposed to be like 7.64 million. But I'm sure we'll get a good figure by the coming census in August this year. So that will tell exactly how many people are there in Tanzania. Currently, it's estimated that the amount of solid waste generated in their country is about, you can imagine, listen to this figure carefully, 12.1 to 17.4 million tons per year. In other words, 0.66 to 0.95 kilograms per capita per day. So you can imagine, everybody of us here is almost generating 1 kilogram of waste each day. So you can see how much we have. So, and people have calculated, and they are suggesting that if you calculate this annually, we have like 241 to 347 kilograms per year from each of us. What are the major sources? It's household, industries, and the commercial areas. Institutions also, they are not spared. Markets, we have the problem. And the street sweeping, we have the problem as well. So the national waste generation is growing at an estimated rate of about 5% per year. That's a very big figure in terms of growth. Now, despite the problem of data, but the data that are there suggests that most of our municipal solid waste are composed of organic biodegradable. And I think this is specifically, the average composition of municipal solid waste includes garden and wood waste, and one would wonder why are the garden and wood waste considered waste? It's a fundamental question that we need to ask. Why can they be waste? They are supposed to be mainly manure or energy resources. But apart from that, food waste is about 7%, paper is around 11%, plastic is about 7%, glass 4%, metal and tin about 1%, textile waste about 2%, and then ashes. We burn a lot of stuff in our homes, in different places, and that's considered to be about 8%. I'm sure even our colleagues from other countries who have joined us here and getting the help that kind of similar scenario. So for the third stage of environmental report published in 2019 for Tanzanian situation, suggested that there are more than 10,000 tons of municipal solid waste generated each day in the country, and only 10% to 30% are collected. So 10 to 30% is the only amount that is being collected. What does it signify? So most of the waste is just left unattended or burned haphazardly. So people are more likely to live in places where they smoke what has been burned. So this problem is more pronounced in its water settlement. We know that many places are not properly planned, and with the increasing population, you can have that kind of situation. So we still have the problem also on that angle. This challenge is exacerbated by existing poor waste management. We can tell, you go to every city, the expectation from city directors is that I want to put this system, I want to put this system, I want to have a dump site, I want the system to transport this waste, I want to have roads that they can access people's houses, but it's a challenge, we all know. So how do we manage in that kind of a scenario? And I think the session like this is very critical to see with the existing situation what can be done despite the challenge of infrastructure system that we have. So despite all those challenges that we have, the government itself has embarked on different programs at the level of institutional framework, legal framework, and even practices to address the challenges that we are facing today. We know the governing environmental policy of 2021, which has been revised from the initial policy that we had before, but again, the government through the Vice President's office has created what they call National Environmental Master Plan for Strategic Intervention on Environmental Issues that was just launched in June this year. So itself is identified big problems that we are facing, and they try to give some measures that can be used to address the environmental problems that we are facing today. So apart from that, we have regulations on public health, we have regulations in other like local government regulations. They are also meant to address the problem of solid waste that we are facing today. So, in view of the above, and to effectively address the issue of municipal waste challenges, there's a need to, among others, provide a clear and specific policy guidance in addressing issues related to integrated waste management system. Do we need to use the waste as energy resources? Do you need to use waste as manure? Do you need to recycle? Do you need to do whatever we can in order to reduce the amount of waste that is going to the dump? I think this brings the concept of ecological footprint. Like how much space of land we need for our resources, but for us to generate waste that they cannot create problem to our lives. So for us as developing countries, we don't have that high ecological footprint, but the trend is showing that we are moving in the same direction like other developed countries in the world in terms of ecological footprint that each individual is supposed to have. So we need to retard that process of having more ecological footprint because the notion is just the same as this has been told. We have been told many times, one planet. We need to live in a healthy planet. We need to live in a healthy planet if we have ways of better practice of managing solid waste that we generate. Instead of doing that, then we are more likely to suffer from problems associated with poor solid waste management. So, having said so, the guest of Ghana, I don't want to spend much of the time. I'm sure the floor is yours, and I would like to stop there. And again, I would like to appreciate for the travels of our colleagues from other countries, my colleagues from other regions who have visited here, and take note that the Director General is very much appreciating all the initiatives you are taking in addressing the problem of solid waste management in my area. I would like to say thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Menon, for the wonderful keynote address, which basically summarizes the agenda for all of us. We are privileged to have Dr. Edwin, who is the Chief Executive Officer in the President's Office for Regional Administration and Local Governance. So I would now request Dr. Edwin to kindly deliver his keynote address to address all the participants. So Dr. Edwin, over to you.
Dr. Menon Jangu, the Director of Environmental Research and Management, NEM. As I know, you are representing Engineer Dr. Samuel Wenga, the Director General of NEM. I recognize the presence of Mr. Sheha Jaja Juma, the Director General of Zanzibar Environmental Management Authority, and his representatives. My sister, Dr. Sunita Narai. Now I understand why you serve as Director General of the Center for Science and Environment. I have happily enjoyed listening from your very self-eloquent speech. City directors from various cities in Tanzania, from Mbeya, Dodoma, Dar es Salaam, Arusha, and Mwanza. Dear delegates from the Center of Science and Environment, I will mention some. Here I have in my papers, Mr. Nibiti Yadav, the Program Director, Mrs. Ishita Gagi, the Program Manager, Dr. Basu, the Expert of Pollution Control. Thank you. Mr. Aditya Batra, the Senior Director, and Mr. Atin Biswasi. Apart from serving as director in Salt Waste Management, I can see you moderating us here so very well. Thank you so much. I also understand the presence of the distinguished delegates and participants from the republics of Namibia, Zambia, Uganda, Eswatini, and I hope the virtual audience, because I'm told this event is being undertaken by the live stream. So the virtual audience probably, so the Federal Republics of Ethiopia, Republic of Kenya, Ghana, Mozambique, I recognize wherever you are. And more importantly, I understand the presence of my fellow country persons here, colleagues from the government ministries, the governmental and non-governmental agencies, the media houses. Helen Chilongo, I'm happy that you are here. You walk around almost everywhere. Distinguished colleagues and gentlemen, I think it's still morning, so good morning to you all. So I have to make it clear that I'm standing before you even though I do not deserve. Yes, I do. I am humbled to be here only because of the challenge of having many timetable of my Honorable Minister of State, Honorable Bashungwa, who wanted to be here in person. But because of other equally important assignments at national level, he was not able to make it. So this should not be taken as a sign for him not being committed. He is extremely committed. And actually, he decided to bring in someone who is one of the pollutants. I will explain why I am one of the pollutants, especially in the city. And even though I was not part of this program. So this happens sometimes for good reason. He was busy so that he could bring in someone like me. Yes. To self-invite on this important event. And I think going forward, I will submit my players so that I become part of this, this initiative. So on behalf of the government of Tanzania, through the Minister of State in the President's Office, Honorable Bashungwa, and my permanent secretary, Professor Shevdoe, I am pleased to welcome you all, colleagues from Zambia, Uganda, Ghana, Eswatini, Ethiopia, Namibia, Kenya, Mozambique, and Rwanda, without forgetting colleagues from India, to this lovely country, the land of Kilimanjaro and Zanzibar. For me, your presence is a clear indication on the scale, on the level of your commitment on environmental issues. So we are grateful. And we are grateful for choosing Tanzania to be one of the destinations where you come here and, have this common ground to learn from each other. Likewise, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to all the participants who have traveled, from various angles of this country. So colleagues from Mbeya, Arusha, Mwanza, Salaam, we are happy and we congratulate you for allocating time to be here today. And also allow me to sincerely register that Tanzania is a great country. It's a great country. We are not trying to be proud of ourselves, but we are trying to register what is going on here. It's a warm country, and Dar es Salaam is a very hospitable city. So during your stay, enjoy yourself. I am very sure people from NEM and other government officials will further give you clear guidance on how to walk around and enjoy our tourist attractions. Distinguished participants, circularity or solid management, solid waste management, it is a global challenge. It is a global challenge on the one side of the equation, but it is a business opportunity on the other. I was enjoying listening from your speech. I could see the way we would want to push this agenda of a circular economy. And your emphasis was very clear, very, very clear. Use, use, and use, and use. So if I have to draw, connecting dots, I will end up having a cycle. So probably this is figuratively, that's what you mean by having a circular economy. But what it means intuitively, you may not be safe if what you are using right now is going on. If we factor in the issues of technology, if we factor in the issues of, say, the private sector participation, probably this issue of recycling, this issue of circular economy can rapidly be achieved. The challenge will be, how do we commoditize the solid waste? So commoditization should come into play here. So being both a global challenge and also a global business opportunity, which was missing in your presentation. Of course, when you bring in the issues of economics, the private sector, you cannot deny, it has to be there. So these are not the words of the Honorable Minister. Allow me sometimes to mix so that I speak my mind. And knowing that I'll be safe, even though I speak some of the words which are not in his speech, but because I'm one of his advisors. So I'm sure he will understand, all of you will understand that. So we have to deal holistically. We have to have approaches which follow under the holistic arrangement, but at the same time, collectively. It is a fight that cannot be achieved. The battle that we will never win if we work based only on our individual efforts or policy arrangement. And no wonder why we are having colleagues from either SADC, the member states, or EAC. And we have COMESA, some members of COMESA, people from Zambia, they're members of COMESA. So I will, in the end, before I conclude the remarks, I will provide some suggestions going forward on how to make it to become even more effective. We have the opportunity in our togetherness, sincerely speaking, to make a bigger difference than to the contrary. And this will be very useful, not only for the future generation, but more important, even in our present days. So we need to avoid the throwaway culture. You have already spoken very well, that use and use and use and use. Why can't you follow after me? Use and use, use and use. So the cycle has to be completed only when you are quite sure and convinced that you have reused to the maximum. This culture has to be, instilled in amongst ourselves, in our families, and we have already listened. Over 75%. I need to listen to the statistics, my brother. Thank you so much. 75% of the solid waste in Tanzania are generated on a daily basis at the household level. I thought, because of the speed of industrialization in the whole of Sub-Saharan Africa and the other developing nations, probably, so the industrial plant should be responsible to produce more. So I was so puzzled. The contrary seems to be the case here. That means the cultural change for the better, has to start from home. The parents, we are all parents here, or we are future parents, potentially. We have to ensure we provide this knowledge at household level. When you were speaking about segregating, I was equating to the famous 5 ways of Kaizen, a Japanese philosophy in enhancing product quality and productivity at the workplace. And actually, the first S of Kaizen is about sorting. And the third one, which is called Say So, is about shining. So we said we have to sort out the value-adding and non-value-adding stuffs at our workplace to ensure that we can be able to treat, depending on where this is solid waste, it will be easy to recycle. It will be easy to find out which one. I was listening again. Some solid waste have got a very minimal caloric value, such that it may not be a good source of energy production if we have to recycle using the incineration. If I was properly following your lecture. But the bottom line remains, sorting is necessary. The question is, how many of us will do sorting of solid waste at home? It is a practice at household level. So on behalf of the minister responsible for local governments, and because all the households that you know, they operate at a very smallest unit of the local government, either in the case of the urban areas, or VGG villages in the case of village areas, but they are under the local government. So I think we will take it up. My sister from Dodoma, the president's office, I think this is one of the outcomes that is coming from this session, that we still have a lot to do in collaboration with the vice president's office to see how we can assist each other, come up with a policy to instill the culture of understanding, segregating, and managing solid waste or other types of waste at home level. The throwaway culture has to be abolished. And please repeat, throwaway culture ought to be abolished. I have to be the change agent. You ought to be the change agent. Colleagues from the municipal authorities, the city directors, I think coming here, it's a proof that you are seriously committed to ensure we have our cities well linked, well organized, that provides a good chance of public health for our people. And for this, I congratulate you for making time to come to Dar es Salaam within this session. Nonetheless, and this is the challenge to the organizer here in Tanzania, as I have said, I am one of the producers of not only the waste, but the solid waste. I think we are missing colleagues from ANROADS in the course of their mandates of constructing roads and bridges. Trust me, they create a number of solid waste, such as they use tires by the vehicles that work around those areas. Some scrap metals, they're not here. The same to Tarura. I think in future they might be considered. Dawasa and the likes of Dawasa. Just an example, but I know we are having some other water regulatory and the sanitation authorities across the country. We have hospitals. They use syringes, but most of them, they are made from plastic materials. So the recycling part of it. I think this session will be very beneficial for them. And more importantly, we as a data transit agency, we provide public transport. Currently, our ridership stands at between 190 to 200 a day. Imagine you provide service to move to urban mobility, people to move point A to point B at a tune of 200,000 a day in one city, in one corridor. We will be having up to 6 corridors in the very near future. So if you are carrying about 200 people a day, 200,000 people a day, and we know our culture, we come in drinking our mineral water. While the throwaway matter has not been out of our thinking completely. So what do you expect, my brother, Dr. Jam? So you should expect that I am, with my customers, I am responsible for making solid waste pollution in this. So for me, and one of the reasons why this project came into being was to sustain the environment on 2 fronts. One, to reduce emission of carbon dioxide, which is responsible for global warming. You are experts. I am not. Actually, I'm just speaking from the traditional knowledge, but you are better positioned to speak with scientific mandate. So carbon dioxide emission was one of the responsibilities of this project to significantly reduce. But 2 were on the solid waste issues. Currently, we are having a fleet of 210 vehicles. Each vehicle is using not less than 8 tires, especially those articulated buses. So you can just take a number. Probably most of you are mathematicians. So how many tires we're using? And I don't think we use tires for the end of 12 years under the contract. We change after every several, maybe 1 year or 2 years. So you can imagine those used tires. When we look, we also need to be properly guided. And I guess I want to believe this session, this meeting is one of the avenues for us to know better on how to manage the solid waste along our corridor. So I humbly submit that in future, the minister, when you'll be invited to again launch or provide some background work, I'll be here to responsibly say this is what we've done. And this is where we have benefited getting this knowledge. This meeting could be one of the, or this forum, the sort of forum like this will be one of the avenues for us to be properly informed. So indeed, the participation of all of you is clear indication, as I've said, on our commitment to address the global and as well the local challenges in respect of managing the solid waste and having a balanced ecosystem for our people, and towards achieving the sustainable development goals of 2025. So it's a sort of the international commitment. On behalf of the government of Tanzania, and particularly on behalf of the President's Office, the regional administration, local governments, I am here to assure you that the efforts and commitment you have shown will not end without having the benefits. We have taken note of the presentation you have made here, and my colleagues from the cities, and I myself, we will be there to ensure the benefits of the outcome of this interaction we put in practice to further contribute to our mother continent, to our mother country.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Finally, I want to put 2 things as a food for thought. Now, these are mine. 1, environmental aspect in it is a public good. It is a public good in the sense that the benefits of environment benefits everybody. Nobody is excluded to enjoy the benefits and therefore even the consequences of environmental pollution. If I have to address on a circular economic point of view, I will further extend why I'm reasoning along the lines of public good and not private good. It is a public good in the sense that no exclusivity in terms of consumption of the environmental benefit, And therefore, the social marginal benefit that comes from the environment exceeds the private marginal benefit of the same. Somehow technical, but it is very simple. Every person can enjoy. So there is no incentive of any private entrepreneur, the market force, to come into play. In this case, as my brother has spoken so well, we have a discretion to protect our environment. That is within the doctrine of invisible hand by Adam Smith, that you need an invisible hand to assist. This is the government. This is the government, why the government is coming in. I want to assure you, the efforts to be made by the government alone, it is a necessary intervention, but not sufficient condition to achieve the sustainable environmental ecosystem that we want. This is now from the technical point of view. So, because we are having the Public-Private Partnership Act here in Tanzania, and I believe other African countries, even India as well, why can't this team, this very wonderful session, to take interest, to think on how the private sector and the public sector may come into play, having a predictable registration, having a predictable, well-defined incentives, so that we can invite the private to commoditize further, to commoditize the environmental issues that we consider they are issues, while from the entrepreneurial point of view, it is an opportunity. We are running a project, BRT project, under the public-private arrangement. We see the benefit. We tried to do the same in the past, even before independence, only by using the private arm. Never worked out. Up until present, in the recent past that we can see at least, we have a predictable future. Within the same paradigm of thinking, I believe if we can further analyze, nitty-grittize our understanding, we should be able to come up with a clear, indicative incentive to further invite the private sector to work with the public sector. I am sure this opportunity will turn out to be a great history and milestone to our countries. I'm saying it's a food for thought. Yes. It is not a recommendation. Food for thought. Number two, within the EAC context, within the SADC context, and as well as the EAC SADC commercial tripartite, and now we're having CFTA, the African Free Continental Trade Area. The agenda of intra-trade, African intra-trade and industrialization is at the top. I believe as the level of industrialization comes up, the figure that Dr. Jang was presenting here will potentially change. I had a chance to be in highly industrial country where the major source of waste comes from factories. So as we industrialize, that data may dramatically change. So because at national, regional, and the private level, we've been pushing the industrial, moving from agrarian to industrial countries. Is there any forum at EAC level, SADC level, COMESA, or the private level, where we have a solid chapter to present our case? Again, it's a good for them. My sister, my brother, it's a food. Do we have that one? I leave it to you. And I'm sure with these heads here, you will come up with something clear answers. If it is already taken on board, then we throw it out. So the throwaway agenda may come here. But if it is yet to, why can't you escalate this matter at national level, therefore regional, formally at regional level, we address these matters collectively, as we have said at the beginning. It has to be holistic and a collective approach to achieve the goal. And then the last one, not because of the level of importance, but just a matter of arrangement, I want to insist. The social marginal benefit of environment exceeds the private marginal benefit, and therefore there is no market mechanism that can internalize the environmental consequences or the environmental benefits. I sincerely share this with you, that think through the lines in the letters of the Private Partnership Act in various countries. See if we can bring in, transparently, defined with clear mandates and no mistrust to ensure that the private sector is properly engaged, to ensure that the solid waste aspects are addressed to the end. So with this, my very personal thoughts, which I call them food for thought. Now let me go back to the Honorable Minister. I have a lot of expectations from this workshop. And therefore, going forward, I am sure, quite sure and quite convinced that the platform of you guys being here for 2 days, under the title Global Forum of Cities for Circular Economy, will lead by examples. That means, at the end of the day, we want to see the fruits, tangible fruits, tangible benefits coming from this session. How? By putting into practice the resolutions that will be made there. It is better to be here to study, get the knowledge, but what matters the most? Practice. At our workplace, at our household level, and more importantly, requesting the support from the government. And the government to be in to address the challenge. 1, 2, I believe you will expand the network of global cities beyond Africa. And this is very important because we are affecting the global as a. My best wishes to all of you for a very grateful discussion and a very meaningful learning from each other. With this note, Madam, and my brother, and all of you, I am exceedingly grateful and humbled to declare that this session is officially open. Thank you so much for your audience.
Very, very nice. Thank you. Very wise words.
Thank you so much, Dr. Edwin. It was overwhelming. It was truly an inspiring note that this event is going to start with. Thank you so much for your passion, for your ownership, for your concern, for the global challenge that we call circularity in solid waste management. Now, before we move on to release the official report, I would like to take the opportunity to request Dr. Sunita Narayan, who has been authored many books in her 40 years of incredible journey to combat global warming, climate change. She has written many books, and one of the books that has received wide appreciation from the global readers is Conflict of Interest. I would request her to hand over a copy each to Dr. Edwin and Dr.
Little embarrassed to give it to you, but I hope you find it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Really, thank you, all of you, both of you.
So now it's time to officially release the scoping report, solid waste management in Africa. A scoping report to be the ground for future action. If I may request all the three panelists to kindly take that book wrapped in brown paper to kind of do the official release, and then we can distribute one copy of this report to all the colleagues who are present.
And I want both my colleagues also. They are the ones who worked on it. So please, Siddharth and Richard, please come. Please come. Richard, come. You have a copy, Richard? Take the sample. So CSC has a tradition. We never wrap books now because It's a lot of waste.
Yes, I
So we
and some of
tried,
these are
yes.
solid.
So these are solid waste. We're going to have to discard this as well now.
So the report is now officially released.
Thank you.
Very good.
So I would really like to extend a warm vote of thanks to all the distinguished panelists, Dr. Menon, Dr. Edwin, and Dr. Smithanarayan, for their kind words in this inaugural session. So with their kind permission, we would now take a short break and we will distribute the kits. There will be a registration form in the kits, and I would request all of you to take time to fill out the form so that we can use the coordinates to stay connected going forward. And we have tea behind you, so we'll take a short tea break.
Let's take a group picture before we move on.
Yes, that's a very good idea. So can I request all the participants to gather in front of this stage, please, so that we can take a group photo.
That's a very good idea. Otherwise, it always gets left. So good. Please come.
Please, everybody, please join us here for a group photo.